Andrew Wowk, thanks for joining us, mate. How's it going?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. It's 6 a.m. here in London, so if I'm a bit bleary-eyed, I do apologise, but that's what goes down when you're trying to coordinate different time zones. Mate, it's a bloody pleasure to have you, honestly, because you're like a figure that I've known for quite a while within the Sydney music scene. We've got a mutual friend. Shouts out to Daria. Who kind of turned me on to you, and your knowledge of techno back when I was just a dubstepper was kind of already vast. So you're within the techno scene, you're someone that I've looked up to for quite a while. For those that don't really know you, could you just give us a bit of a helicopter view of your development through the music industry, kind of what the spark was that got you into it and what's taken you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So, like, basically, when I first got into dance music, it was because of my older brother. He bought we have a radio station here in Sydney, or we used to, called Wild FM, which played like high energy and UK hard house and more commercial Euro dance and stuff like that. And he bought one of their CDs on a recommendation from a friend, and he was like, I don't like this at all. And as he was listening to it, I was like, I love this. This is sick. So he just gave it to me. And then because I've always just been kind of a nerd who gets very, like, if I like something, I like to try and learn as much about it as I can. So I would, sit there and like read the liner notes inside the booklet that came with the compilation. And I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I like hard house and I guess I like high energy. And so then, I'd go to the CD store, or I'd, use my dial-up internet.
Yeah.
And, I'd try and find more music that was within that realm. And basically, by the time I turned 16, I was pretty firmly entrenched in that sort of, yeah, like UK hard house,
Wow.
high stuff like that. And I did a work experience at another radio station we used to have called Rhythm FM. And there were a group of DJs at the time, which was 2001. And at the time, it was people like Mark Dynamics, Kid Kenobi, Leah, Jack McCord, Damien Gowntry, a few other people, who, I came in as this little fresh-faced 16-year-old that was like, yeah, music less than 140 BPM isn't real music.
Yeah.
And they were like, don't worry, we'll teach you. And they kind of like took me under their wing. And it was because of Damien and Jack, I learned all about house music. Leah introduced me to breakbeat. Mark introduced me to like progressive house and techno. And by pure luck, it turned out the week that I was there, it was the week of a huge Gatecrasher event that was happening in Sydney. And they were having guest mixes from a bunch of the people playing at Gatecrasher. And so like I heard Luke Slater did a set, me Katie played Armin van Buren when he was still playing like prog trance stuff.
Yeah.
I think LTJ Bookham came on and did a set. And like obviously for me, like I'd never really heard of any of these names, right? Because of the stuff that I was into. But hearing those sets, I was like, oh wow, like I really enjoyed this one, not so much this one. And it was, yeah, like Luke Slater was the very first techno set I ever heard. And I remember like as he was playing, going up to Mark and being like, what is this music? Like, I really like this. And he's like, dude, this is techno. And I was like, great. I think Hybrid came on. Yeah, Hybrid came on as well. And so that then left me with this, again, because of my tendency to go, oh, I like this thing, I'm going to look into it as much as possible. The next couple of years almost was spent finding out as much about all of those other types of dance music as I could, and just finding out what I liked and what I didn't like. And by the time I was in my late teens, early 20s, a friend of mine was like, dude, you know a lot about music. Why don't you think about like just volunteering, writing some articles for, we used to have a website called In the Mix. And he's like, you're a good writer. Like, you have decent written skills. You know enough about music, give it a try. And so I reached out to them and I basically just asked them, do you have contributors? can I maybe send you like, I'll write an album review of something I like, and you can see if you're happy with it. They gave me some feedback. Like early on, I had a tendency to be probably a little too wordy and a little too descriptive. And they sort of said, you know, what we're interested in is, yeah, we want someone with the knowledge, but also we want something that someone will also want to read to the end. And, you know, you write 1,000-word review of an album,
Yeah.
that immediately is going to cut some people out that are just going to go, I'm not going to read that much.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I developed my writing skills with them, and that sort of led me to also contributing for other things like 3D World and eventually Decoded Magazine, who are a UK-based one.
Yep.
And sort of in parallel at the same time, I'd been very interested in learning how to DJ because of my time at Rhythm FM. And when I finished my work experience, they just donated me a bunch of records, and I saved up money, and I, you know, I'm very, like, I will fully admit, I was also very lucky that I had parents who were happy to help with paying for my first set of turntables. You know, so I saved up as much pocket money as I could, and then they chipped in the remainder that, you know, I was fall short of, and like I will always happily acknowledge and admit, like, you know, that I was privileged enough that they could help me with that.
Yeah.
And then I just practiced learning how to mix. I basically taught myself in conjunction with asking a few of the people that I had become friends with from the radio station, you know, like, can you listen to my mixes? Can you give me some feedback? And they sort of, you know, directed me on what I should focus on. And pretty much since then, you know, it was just doing the usual sort of, you know, when I turned 18, it was finding the events that I liked, practicing more and more, networking with those promoters. And yeah, my very first gig ever was a DJ competition, which was, you know, it was quite serendipitous because the judges were people that were active in the scene at the time, like Ben Corbell, Annabelle Gaspar. And so, you know, I did okay. I came third, which was like, I was really stoked with, you know, like for a first time ever playing out of my bedroom. And I got a lot of positive feedback from them. And they're like, just keep at it, you know, come, you know, make sure people know who you are when you, and come to their events and keep making mixes, keep giving them out, and like people will book you. And yeah, that's just kind of how it ended up happening. And since then, I've been really fortunate, you know. I've played it. I have like a couple of bucket list gigs left that I hope to cross off at some point. But I've, you know, played at pretty much every either club or event that when I was getting into dance music, or, you know, when I was in my early 20s or whatever, they were things that I went, I want to play there one day. I've been really lucky to be able to do that. Like I got to play at Chinese Laundry during its golden era of, you know, 2006 to 2012 or so.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I got to play at Subsonic Festival. I got to play in Melbourne for like Dark Beat and stuff like that, which, you know, where again was like, that's like, it was like, that's my goal. I want to go to Melbourne and play for them. And yeah, it's just been a gradual process, you know, and it's like, even when you've been playing for a very long time, I think something that some people, sometimes it can be hard. Like, you know, when you've been playing for like 18 years, it can sometimes feel like, why should I have to give a mix to this promoter? You know, and it's like, well, because they're a newer promoter, which are coming up in a context of 2020 or 2021. Why should they necessarily have heard of you? And I think some people maybe get a bit like, well, I've been playing for 15 years, you know, people should just know who I am. And it's like, sure, people that were around 10 years ago probably do know who you are. But in the same way that when I was 18, I didn't know who Jeff Mills was. Why should someone now who's 18 or 19 know who I am? And so it's just like, yeah, you still just identify things that you like and places you want to play. You go and make yourself known, give them a mix, and you hope for the best.
That's awesome. So you're still regularly contributing mixes to places that you want to play. I guess you, as you say, you've sort of seen and done it all, but you still.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I'm kind of lucky now in that I often get asked to do mixes for podcast series, and I have my radio show, and so sometimes, often, like there might be something I want to play at, and I've done a mix for somebody, or I've done an episode on the show where it's like that pretty much covers exactly, the kind of music that they would be interested in. So I don't necessarily have to specifically make the time to record a mix for that event. It's more like identifying from my pre-existing collection of stuff what I could send them, and saying, hey, I think you would like this. But yeah, definitely. The reason I ended up getting playing for Shed was because they had a podcast series and I was listening to it and really enjoying it. And I reached out to them and was like, hey, can I submit a mix for you? If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. They ended up really liking it. And then they were like, yep, this is great. We'll release it in the series and we'll look at putting you on in future. Yeah, there's events and stuff like that now that are coming through that, yeah, I do still I put as like that's somewhere I would like to play, and I'll make the effort to reach out to them.
I think that's the complete opposite to the mentality that I've had for so long, which is just basically making mixes for myself and then putting them up on SoundCloud and hoping that some random algorithm delivers them to someone in the know, and someone comes in and says, you know what, you've done a good job and we're going to give you an opportunity. But as I'm starting this radio show, I'm obviously, people aren't approaching me. I'm reaching out to people to say, hey, would you like to do this? So I think that's a really important lesson for people to learn. If you want something, ask the question.
Yeah, the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And yeah, look, rejection always stings. It never stops stinging. And people say, oh, you just got to, get a thick skin and get used to rejection. And it's like, yeah, it starts to sting less. But I think if you ever reach a point where it literally doesn't affect you at all, it might mean you probably might be considering the end of your career, right? Like maybe this doesn't matter to you that much anymore. So, rejection is always kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess they don't like my music, or they don't think I fit, or whatever. And that's fine. But that's what I try to say to people who ask, sometimes people come to me, which feels really weird. Like some people come to me for advice and like, what should I do? And I'm like, I don't feel like it was that long ago that I was coming to like Robbie Lowe and being like, what should I do to get gigs? And it's just like, that's a bit of a reminder of the fact that, yeah, I'm getting older, but yeah, the worst that's going to happen is they're going to say no. And for the person that says no, there's someone else that's going to go, this is great, I would like you to play. But you won't know unless you reach out to them.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, that's awesome. Now, we've spoken a lot about your DJing, or you've spoken a lot about your DJing. This show is kind of centered around music production. So what's been your music production trajectory? When did you start? How soon into electronic music were you when you said, I want to have a crack at making some of this myself? Because I've heard some of your shit and it's tight as hell and I can learn a lot from it.
Oh, well, thank you. Firstly, that's really nice. It really wasn't that much later after getting into it that I also tried to have a go at making it. I would have been about 13 or 14.
Holy shit, that's young as, dude.
I got it but bear in mind that I got into it at like 10, right? So yeah. It was still 3 years into being into the music, right? It wasn't like I was listening to Kraftwerk in the womb or something.
No. But I was into metal until I was in my 2021, and then I discovered electronic music. So yeah, just hearing that you got that and I know you're into metal as well, but it's like that's one of your catalyst was at 10. That's crazy. I was still in Catholic school.
but it's funny you say right. I didn't get into metal till I was about 23 or 24. Up until that age, I was like dance music, like that's it. So I kind of went through like a reverse process in that To some people. So yeah, some people go, oh my God, like I only discovered dance music at 20. I'm like, okay, but you discovered hip hop and rap at 11,
Yeah,
right? And it wasn't until my late teens that I developed an interest in hip hop and stuff
true.
like that. So, but yeah, it was probably about 13. I got a demo of Fruity Loops, and I just mucked around with it. And I think like the main thing Fruity Loops taught me was about um, sequencing and arranging music. Um, it definitely didn't help me a great deal with sound design. Probably partly because it was a demo, so it pretty much came with like a very small range of options. It was basically like it was almost more like a sampler. Like they gave you a bunch of samples, and it has a little step sequencer in it, and you just arrange them. So it taught me a ton about that. It wasn't until I was about maybe 19 or 20. So that I got for quite a while, I was just sort of mucking around, not really taking it all that seriously. I think it's about 20. I got a copy of Reason. And at that time, it would have maybe been Reason 4 or possibly even 3, like one of the older versions. And that was when I started to actually think about sound design and like what is what is a synthesizer, what does a patch do, and all that. And I'm talking very rudimentary understanding. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't programming my own patches.
But
And
for the first time, you weren't just dragging in samples and laying them out. For the first time, you're actually
right.
building sounds out of, stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And at the time it would have been like using just the uh patches that came with it, right? So it was like, set out a little sequence of notes and then kind of flick through the presets and go, which one do I like? And then, randomly turning dials on it and just going, what does that do to the sound? And like, I started to get a rudimentary understanding of, what does the A, the D, the S, and the R do on this? Never, but you know, certainly not having a technical understanding and certainly having very little understanding of music theory. Like I'm not tone deaf. I could tell if something harmonized or didn't, but I wouldn't be able to tell you why or anything like that. And the same, I could tell you, oh, if you turn up the R, it's like the sound seems to last longer. But I didn't understand that means release, and it's literally, and all that. I had no idea. And yeah, it must have been about 26, 27 when I was then like, what, like, again, it was just fiddling around. Every now and then I just felt like maybe having a muck around and seeing what I could do. Never really had the intention of writing a tune, more just like, this is just kind of a fun outlet. I think I'm about 26, 27. A friend of mine, he was like, look, he was like, he just asked me, like, do you write music as well? And I was like, sort of. Here's like some random half finished stuff that I just played around with. And he gave me some really nice advice. It's like, look, you can tell you sort of know what you're doing, but you can also tell that like you don't really know why you know what you're doing.
Okay.
In the sense that like, yeah, you have an understanding of arrangement, you have an understanding of like things that harmonize and don't, but you can also tell you have very little understanding of music theory, or like, you don't know the technical terminology about this kind of, because you ask, well, how did you make that sound? I'm like, I went to the preset that was like this one, and then I turned up the dial. It was like on one of the soft synths inside Reason. It's called Thor. I was like, I went to this preset on Thor, and then I turned up the KBD dial on the very left-hand side of the synth. Nice. And he's like, do you know what any of that actually means? And I was like, no, I just know it sounded what I wanted to sound like. And he was like, okay, if you sit down and spend some time understanding this stuff, you will probably get a lot more you'll get a lot more value out of it. Like I think you'll enjoy yourself more. And two, one of the things that I at the time said, like part of the reason I never really finished tracks is like in my mind, I'm like, I want this, but I have no idea how to make it sound that way. Because like, if you get a basic understanding of some of these things, some of these concepts, you should be able to achieve that better. And yeah, so then I just spent some time, honestly, watching free tutorials on YouTube
Okay.
from various people. There's an amazing channel that's run by Propellerhead, who are the people that own Reason, where they take you on like deep dives of all the VSTs inside the software, explain what they all do, both on a practical level, like this dial makes the sound do this, but then also give you a little bit of a theoretical understanding of like what is actually attack, decay, sustain, and release, or what is a sine wave, what is additive versus subtractive synthesis, and all these words that 10 years ago I'd have been like, I don't know. They teach it in a really, really straightforward, user-friendly and engaging way. And then, there were some other great channels. Stranjah, who's a drum and bass producer,
Yep.
he has an awesome free channel where he takes you through all kinds of stuff, from like chopping up breaks to free VSTs that you can, use. And I just like watched a bunch of videos and tried to like mimic what was happening in them, but then go further and be like, okay, how can I apply that to what I'm trying to do? And it was then, just over time, probably by the time I was about 31, 32, I was like, okay, I think I have enough understanding now that I could give this music to people and see what they think. And by then I'd also started to get a clearer understanding of like what I like most about writing music. And I realized like I do really, really like sample-based producing.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a good realization to have. Like that, because one of the things that Gilson spoke about was workflow. Removing as many barriers to creating what is in your head and making it into a physical thing is like the most important thing. So
Yeah.
if you've realized that sample-based production is how you like to produce, then you can just jump in and get made what you need made. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I realized that when I was working actually it was on a remix for a local producer, Struz, who owns a label called Monarch. He's a drum and bass DJ / producer. And I remember like he put a tune out, I think it was called Bubblin'. And I was like, this is really cool. Can I just have a crack at a remix? Like if you don't like it, you don't have to put it out. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I want to make this like sort of early 2000s tech step kind of thing. And, I was like, okay, I have two options. I can either sit here and try to fiddle and create the perfect Hoover replication, and the perfect, tech step style bass line, or I can find a tune from that era, take the Hoover sample out of it, and rework it how I want to. And, like I know I want a Hoover in this tune. And it's like, if I know I want it and there's a way to get it, that's what I'll do. And one of the things I like to do a lot is like start with a sample of some kind, whether it's a full loop and then it's like chop it up into, individual little slices, or it's like just like a one shot of something. I like to start from that and put it through as many like effects chains as possible to make it into something different. So, for example, in that one in the drums, I actually started with an old break from I think it was an old optical tune, but I'm not 100% sure. And I cut it up into like as many individual slices as possible, like just the isolated kick, just like an isolated ghost note, like those little really quiet bits of high-end percussion that sort of don't really add something on their own, but they fill out the sound a little bit. and then like, individual snare hit, like as much as I possibly could, and completely rearranged it into an entirely different pattern, ran it through some like certain distortion stuff to give it essentially like a really crunchy edge that I was looking for. And also, I knew I wanted this particular beat structure to it. I knew I was looking for a certain type of snare and so on. And I thought, like that was so much easier that was like so much more enjoyable and got the end product that I was looking for than if I had sat there sculpting a kick from scratch, sculpting a snare and so on, which I'm sure I'd eventually have gotten there. But it's like, to me, it's still a creative process to take something and make it sound completely different to how it originally was. And yeah, nowadays, a large chunk of how I work is I don't often really use that many VSTs or soft synths. A large proportion of what I have, if you like open up like a project file, is actually just instances of the sampler. And I've put in, whether they're one shots or loops that are put up into splices, in and, given them a range of note values, put some of them forward, some of them reverse, and, a filter on some, on others, and essentially, arrange sequences of notes that basically then play out the individual samples. So yeah, I could rearrange a drum pattern, or maybe I've got like a dub synth type hit, and play that in a certain note sequence, have effects added to it like a reverb or a delay or something, so that it creates a different tone or a different way of actually hearing the sound. So very often, what I end up with is quite far removed from the original sample that was loaded into the sampler. And the best example I can think of for that was I did a remix recently for Sarah Tonkin and Askham, they used to, or they still do, the Construct events in Sydney. And they made a tune that was like this really cool, like breakbeat techno thing. And I was like, I want to turn this into more of like a heady sci-fi kind of track. And I ended up using a small splice from one of their percussive elements, and through the process of just sculpting it and putting it through various effects, actually turned it into a new bass line. And I just, like, I don't know, I get a lot of enjoyment out of that process. And I knew the kind of bass line I wanted too. It was like, I want this very specific style of bass line. And I don't know, I get this weird enjoyment out of doing it backwards, like starting with something and going, okay, how do I turn it into that, rather than which synth should I open up and put it in which way.
Is it almost like hearing music for you? You hear an idea, you're like, I hear this in an ever so slightly different way, and your creative process is sparked by, it's almost like other people's music inspires you to create something from that. And yeah.
I think so, yeah. I mean, and it probably comes from being a DJ first. Because the way I DJ is I tend to approach my sets more from the perspective of how do I utilize individual tunes as like pieces of a puzzle. And when you step away from it and you see the whole thing put together and you go, oh, wow, it's an elephant. Like, I obviously love the tunes that I play, and I don't buy music I don't like. But when I'm also buying stuff and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, in what way would I use this to get a certain overall outcome that I'm looking for? And I think that because of that, that is probably why I write music the way I write it. Like I find a really great sample pack of there's one that Blue Martin put out for free, which is a bunch of 90s jungle tunes that they have cut up into single slices of drum breaks, atmospheres, bass lines, stabs, everything. Like the amount of work that would have gone into that is incredible. and they just put it out for free. And I'm like, how do I now use those individual pieces to achieve a certain overall image or aesthetic that I'm looking for? Yeah, I think that's probably why I like writing music the way I write it. And yeah, you know, if you ask me how do I make a Reese bass line from an actual soft synth, I'm probably going to tell you I have no idea. But I'll be like, if you like, take this one shot of this like tiny little bit of an actual Reese bass line, and then just make sure you just fade out the tail end of it just a little bit, and then fade in the beginning of the next clip of it, and then, you know, just time stretch it a little bit and like put a little bit of a low pass filter on it, and it'll sound exactly like you made a Reese bass line that can just continue without any gaps in it.
Yeah.
But it's not like, you know, how did yeah, I didn't technically make it, right? But it's like yeah, I could tell you how to make one that sounds exactly like one from some other thing. But if you ask me like which synth should I use and, you know, what setting should, I'll just be like, don't know.
I like that, but you found a method that works for you, and
Very much
it's
so.
and it's the quickest way for you to make the music that's in your head, and you know, whatever that ends up being for anyone. It's, you know, someone in my position, I want to try and have a basic understanding, as you did in the early days of Reason, understanding of what these synths do, and I need to be able to play with them and stuff. But I don't know if I might end up going purely sample-based production myself. I just don't know. Or there might be one that I learn a lot of, and the rest I'll just say can go fuck themselves, you know?
Yeah. 100%. And I think that, like, at the end of the day, if you're happy with the output of the music that you make, and you're happy with that it sounds like what you want it to sound like, then really how you get there, it's just semantics at the end of the day. You know, I 100% disagree with something like ghost producers, because I think there's a huge difference even between taking something like samples and working them to make them do something that you want them to do, versus basically telling someone else, make this song for me. Because even in sample-based work, you still have to do the work. You still have to sit there and make it sound the way you want it to sound. I certainly don't have a problem with, say, studio partners. So like Sasha, for example, right? You know, a lot of his biggest tunes, they were made in collaboration with Charlie May, Junkie XL, James Holden. Now, given a world where we have tracks like Expander and Bloodlock and Boiler Room, which required Sasha to sit down with Charlie May and Junkie XL and James Holden to help him with technical components of achieving what creatively in his mind he wanted to achieve. And he fully acknowledges their involvement, right? Like you look at any releases it has, and it will always say produced in conjunction with the following studio technicians. In a world where we can have a track like Expander, which just means that he had to work with somebody, versus a world where we can't have a track like Expander because of some notion of like, well, he should have made it entirely by himself. I'd rather live in the world where we have a track like Expander.
Yeah.
But that, again, is totally different to, say, like a ghost producer where you pay a person to make a song for you and they get literally no credit. And you put your own name on it and you act like you made it, right? Like I think that that's disingenuous. But you know, I think that for people that are making their own music, and whatever way you're making it yourself, if it is satisfying to you and it achieves the outcome that you want to achieve with the music that you're writing, and it sounds the way you want it to sound, then don't worry about how someone else is doing it. Because there might be someone out there who knows a Roland Juno 6 backwards, right? They could troubleshoot and repair one if they had to. But you put them in front of an EMU sampler and ask them to chop up an amen break, and they'll just give you a blank stare, right? And so it's like, you might sit there and worry about, oh, but this person knows how to use synths. And it's like, okay, but you know how to do stuff that they don't. And what you know how to do is making you, or is helping you make the music that you want to make. And so that's fine. Like, that's good enough.
Mate, that's fucking awesome. That is fucking awesome. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, dude. I want to touch on something. You're somebody who's quite active on social media, and you put stuff out there that's quite thought-provoking for a lot of people. At least you get some good discussions going about the music industry, which it's really good to see. What can you sort of tell us? What have you learned about the music industry? Your critical thinking background, I want to, you can touch on as well if you like. But yeah, what have you learned kind of fucking with the internet a bit?
Well, yeah. So I mean, I don't do music full time. My day job is in academia. I'm a PhD candidate and a university casual teacher. I think that what I've probably learned is that being willing to express your thoughts or opinions is a double-edged sword. The music industry, it's a creative industry, but it's not that different from a lot of other industries in the sense that there are problems with it. There are things that aren't good about it. There are people that benefit from it despite, also perpetuating those problematic practices.
Yeah.
And, sometimes, unfortunately, some of the advice that's given or some of the attitudes that to be successful is you have to put up with that bullshit. And you have to just let it go. And you have to just, be like, well, that's just the music industry. And that's unfortunately, and it's not specific to the music industry, right? It happens in finance. It happens in academia, right? Where it's like, well, you should just keep your mouth shut because, no one likes the dissenter. And, to an extent, that's true. There are certainly things that I know for a fact there are probably places or there are probably people that I won't play for or things because of the fact that I've been like, hey, man, like, or hey, person, this is some bullshit practices you're doing. Maybe think about doing better. And unfortunately, they don't respond well to that. But at the same time, there are tons of people out there who really, really appreciate that level of honesty and candor. And I think irrespective of the personal choice someone else makes about whether they want to be, like someone who says, hey, I'm going to call out bullshit if I see it, or they say, you know what, I think I'm just going to let it go. That's a personal decision and it's not a judgment. There's no judgment regarding someone's own personal values regarding what they wish to do in respect to their own career. However, I think if you're someone who is seeing problematic practices and wants to say something, but is scared about what kind of effect it might have, like, oh, will that mean that, will it mean I get less gigs or will it mean people don't want to put my music out? There are people out there who won't like it. And there are people out there who will go, all right, well, guess I'm not booking that person. But I guarantee you there are just as many people out there that will be like, thank you for saying that. And, there are lots of people who speak out about this stuff, whether it's in a very strong way of taking a really strong stance, or it's in a way of just like, hey, has anybody considered about, this possible problematic practice and what we could do about it? More like, I guess, kind of just raising the issue rather than saying, I'm going to specifically do this. That still get loads of gigs and still get lots of music released and still have long, successful careers. And as a matter of fact, build careers out of the respect that they gain for doing that. You look at someone like Dave Clark. He has never taken bullshit, ever. And he's spoken out about it many, many times. Dave Clark still gets plenty of gigs. Dave Clark still puts out music. Like, because there are enough people out there that will go, I really respect that Dave Clark does that. And it's like, I think that if you're someone who's like, I see some of these things and I wish I could say something, but just fucking say it. I guarantee you, for the small amount of backlash you'll get, it's not going to outweigh, one, the feeling that you are living in, that you are doing stuff that's consistent with your own set of beliefs and your own values, and feeling like, you know what, I'm living in line with what I think and believe. And two, the people that will respect you for doing it.
Yeah. There's so much value to be. There's nothing really lost in saying what you're thinking.
Yeah, and you're not being an asshole, right? Like if you've got some really, really, horrible views about things,
yeah,
maybe do keep those to yourself, because no one wants to hear that shit. But like, if you're calling out, other people being assholes, do it. Like, do it, because you're doing something good, So yeah, I guess for me though, like what I've cultivated over the years maybe is a somewhat satirical or tongue-in-cheek way of doing it.
Very much.
And I think I've learned that from I do improv as well, like improv theater, and in particular comedic improv. And one of the skill sets that I learned I guess like a workshop that I did was about how to address societal or potentially problematic content in a satirical way, so that not only are you making people laugh, but you're also making them go, yeah, you know what, that is messed up. Like, we should do something about, like, we should address that problem. And often you're more likely, and this is a psychology thing, you're more likely to get people to listen to your message if it is presented in a palatable way. So attacking someone else and presenting your message in a very aggressive or confrontational way, as irrespective of how valid your message may be and how much on a third party level someone should look at that and go, that is a very good message, immediately people will be on the back foot because of the confrontational component to it. Whereas if you present it in a more in a way that doesn't immediately make them step back and go, whoa, hang on a minute, you're being a little bit, you're being a bit for, like, pushy with that, people will tend to engage more with it. And so, I think that that's something that I've carried over, and I've been like, okay, how can I bring up these things that I think we really need to be addressing, but also do it in a way that isn't going to immediately make a person go, no, don't want to listen to it. That's way too pushy for me. I'd rather make someone giggle and then go, hang on a minute, shit, he's right. Like,
yeah. Because it's so easy to get carried away with the emotion of a thing that and deliver it in a very emotional way, but that puts people on the back foot, as you say. So if you can think slow with it for a minute and just kind of put it out in a way that's more palatable, as you say, yeah, probably you're going to get more people to listen to you.
And there's certainly nothing wrong with being emotional or being firmly believing in what you say, right? Like, that's important. You should firmly believe in what you say. But as you say, unfortunately, irrespective of the fact that I might agree, like, you really should be passionate about this particular thing, and you have a right to be pissed about this thing. Sadly, or unfortunately, the way human psychology works is when someone presents their idea with that level of anger, people listen less. And so it's unfortunate, but it is partly on, the person presenting the information to do it in a way that someone else will listen. And that sucks, right? It sucks that you have to be the one that goes, okay, how do I put this to another person, so that they listen to me when, let's say objectively speaking, it is something like sexism or racism, right? Which is like, that's shit and it's wrong. It's like, it shouldn't have to be on the person calling that thing out to present it to someone who's doing it in a way that they'll listen, right? That sucks that it has to be that way, but there is a level of value to doing it that way. And it's about just kind of, I guess, remembering in your own self that this is not you backing down on the issue, or this is not you being less passionate about it or compromising. It's more about, how do I most successfully actually get the issue listened to? And it's a hard thing to reconcile, because it feels like you're doing the very opposite of that. But it's just about trying to remember that the goal here is the end outcome of actually getting the other person to listen and go, well, yeah, shit, I think you're right.
Yeah. No, that's very
That's a whole other thing we can go down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I don't want this to become a super political topic. This is all about music and music production, and ultimately music's about fun in my world. So I want to touch on, I want to say you're an incredibly eloquent guy. It's fucking awesome hearing you talk about music in such a candid way. I want to touch on kind of what you got coming up. Tell us about Music for Change.
Okay. So basically, that's a label that I started with Jessica Tassoni, who's a Sydney-based DJ, music producer, visual artist. And we basically started it from the concept of, both of us are very passionate and interested in the role of music as a positive force for social change, basically. And when you think about dance music in particular, its two most, I suppose, largest, well, maybe not these days, but I don't want to upset non-house or techno people, but in the early days, house and techno were like the big explosive genres of dance music, and both of those started as movements that were not just about the music that was being made. House started as it was just music that was being played at places for people of color and LGBTQ people to go and dance and party safely and feel like they could express themselves in a safe space. And it was just the music that happened to be being played there. And, it took on a very specific aesthetic. And then obviously, then the music stuff comes in where it's like people going, oh, I like that aesthetic. How do I make it? And so on. And techno started as people in Detroit being fed up with the way that Detroit was being treated by the government, basically. The automotive industry collapsed, no money coming into Detroit. Everyone's looking at the city basically decaying around them and making a statement about what Detroit is like, and looking forward into the future, like almost using this futuristic aspect of techno music to explore like how can we make Detroit better. And we're just really interested in that, and we're like, well, you could still do that in modern days, right? It doesn't mean that just because techno is a now firmly established genre of music, or jungle is, or any other kind of dance music is now a firmly established type of it, doesn't mean that it can't still do things beyond just being good music, right? Like techno can still help people, house music can still help it, and so on. So that's really where it came from. And yeah, we had an EP or a compilation come out in August, which was a big multi-artist, big various artists compilation.
Big.
Yeah, it was 20, I think it was 23 tracks in the end. It's funny because it originally started like me going, God, how do I get people to want to make tunes for this? And being like, oh, how do I? And then it was like, it came to a point where I was like, people were coming, going, could we, like, oh yeah, I want to. And I'm thinking like, at what point do I say, hey, I think we might have enough tunes for this one. Do you want to do something in the future?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do it. So it just kept up. So it just kept on getting like more and more stuff on it. And eventually there was just a cutoff point where I went, okay, if this is ever going to actually come out, I had to say, okay, by July 2021, if you haven't submitted something, then we'll work with you in the future. And yeah, it ended up getting a lot of great support. Dave Clark played one of the tracks from it on his radio show. Annie Klang on her radio show played a couple of tracks from it. Andy Garvey on Pure Space played a couple of tracks from it. And we're going forward, we're going to focus a bit more on individual artist EPs now for the next couple of releases. So like 2 or 3 trackers just from one artist. The way that each release works is there's a certain charity that the 100% of the profits will go to. With the next one we have coming up, it's from a Newcastle-based producer called 10 Ton, who does like kind of heavy 160, 170, but more left field stuff. So it's not sort of straight drum and bass and jungle. It's more like a bit more bass music, 160 BPM, 170 BPM stuff. And basically for the individual artist EPs, we'll just let them choose which charity they're most passionate about. So that not only are they making some music for it, but they also feel like it's addressing something that they are passionate about as well. So currently we're looking at that coming out in January. Because we've got the originals are done. We're just waiting on a remix from somebody to get finished up. And then, yeah, that's basically just going forward. We'll do a couple of EPs. We'll probably do another compilation in 2022. But there was a lot that went into that. So I think we're happy just doing some EPs for a little bit first.
Yeah. You started with a bang, and now you got some EPs. Huge fucking bang, and now you got some like EPs in the works as well. So everything going well there. Any of your own releases coming up as well?
So there is Extra Spicy have a compilation coming out in December, which has a new original track from me on it, which is like a kind of wonky Night Slugs-esque sort of tune.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, which is funny because it's a track I wrote like 7 or 8 years ago. And more recently, I've been basically going back to that stuff and going, now that I know more about making music, is any of this salvageable? Like, could I actually just put a little more work into it, redo it a little bit, and actually have something I could put out? Some of it, the answer is absolutely not. But for this one in particular, I was like, you know what? This is 75% of the way there. And I just sat down and did a little extra. It was quite long originally, and it didn't need to be. Like, it started to get sort of long. I'd have nothing wrong with long tunes. I love them. But this one in particular, it didn't have to be as long as it was. So I just sort of chopped out some of the excess to it. I mixed it down a little better now that I understand how to place stuff in a mix down better. There were some things that were like, oh, that seems to get a bit stale. Why don't I just vary the pattern a little bit? And Ashley ended up really liking it. And like, huge shout out to Ashley. She's been like such a massive supporter of my music, which is amazing. And she's a massive supporter of everyone's music, which I love. Like, I've come across so many awesome new artists because of that label. And she's still just like, hey, people, here's an email address, send us demos. And like, I love that. And yeah, so huge shouts to Ash for putting out some of my stuff, which I also feel like wouldn't have a home elsewhere. Like the level of open-mindedness she has about the music that she puts out. I think, like, aside from some other quite big labels that are like that, which I fully acknowledge, I'm not at a position yet in my production to warrant contacting and going, hey, why don't you put this out? Having an outlet for people that are, lesser known, but making music of that kind is just amazing. And then, yeah, there's another one, which is more of like an ambient electronica type thing. That's coming out on a tape compilation. And I'm pretty sure that's meant to be December, but there have been a couple of delays throughout the year. It was originally meant to be in August, but then because of the pandemic, there were supply chain issues and stuff, so they couldn't actually get physical product made. So currently it's looking very much like it should be December. That's on a label called Unyoked, who do ambient stuff, and they're collaborating with Lazy Days, which is a podcast series that Henry Johnstone from Red Bull organizes. That's like pretty chill tune.
Nice.
Very head noddy stuff. And yeah, they're the two main things that I've got coming out. And then I'll probably be just fiddling and working on things in the meantime. And if they turn into full tunes, they turn into full tunes. If they don't, maybe in 7 years' time, I'll come back to them and they'll turn into full tunes.
Yeah. But at least, with the increase in skill set that you get over that time, you never know what the future could hold for those bits and pieces. And in other good news, you've got some gigs coming up as well. Obviously, lockdown ending. What do you got in the pipeline gig-wise?
Yeah. So good. December 10th, I'm playing for Shed at the Bridge Hotel, big 13-hour thing that they're doing, alongside a really awesome lineup. Kato's playing, Matilda from Melbourne, D-Grade, the Shed DJs, Goanna and Eastern Distributor, Sarah Tonkin,
Sick,
and Sophia Gonzalez. So that's going to be, I guess, under like a broad umbrella of techno, but you could also expect to hear some like breakbeat, electro, other bits. For me at the moment, I'm like super into like really percussive stuff. So irrespective of kind of where I go on the night, it's probably going to have a lot of drums. That's kind of just where I'm enjoying a lot of. And then on the 18th is Zoo Project at the Chippo, the Chippendale Hotel. That's more on the, I guess, what you would, I don't like to use the word linear, but like it's sort of the easiest one I can think of, on the more kind of linear aspect of, like the roll and groove style of techno, just like that kind of consistent loopy sort of sound. That's back to back with Carmel Yeager, who is a really awesome Australian producer and DJ, and I'm very excited to play with her because we both have really broad tastes. So I think it'll be fun finding that like nice Venn diagram overlap of the stuff that we have in common. So they're the two I've got coming up at the moment. I'm sure there'll be stuff in that'll keep slowly trickling in, but I'm just happy to play somewhere. After I had one gig in July when we were briefly allowed to go out again. But at that point, before that, it would have been 9 or even 10 months, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy to just like play some music. Just honestly, I'm actually really afraid of clearing a dance floor. I'm like, do I remember how to play to a dance floor anymore? We'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be fine, mate. And lastly, before I let you go, any last bits of advice for me who is just barely clearing an 8-bar loop right now in the music production world?
Yeah, 2 things. One is keep all of those 8-bar loops. Never get rid of them. Because even if those don't turn into individual tracks, they might be useful in tracks you make later.
Okay.
You might be like, oh, I really just like, I'm looking for this like very specific percussive loop. And then you think, oh shit, I made that like a year ago. And it's right there for you. You don't have to redo it. The other thing is something that I learned from someone else, from Ivan Goff. It was a Melbourne-based, he used to do like, well, he still makes music, but like he was kind of one of the people that was in the golden age of that tribal prog kind of sound from Melbourne. When I was really struggling with turning the same thing, turning sets of loops into an actual song, he suggested instead of trying to arrange as you go, like, so instead of like making a loop and then going, where should that go in the track, or build up and up and up until you have something that you go, this is what the peak of my track would probably sound like. So keep making sounds, keep making loops, keep adding elements until you go, if this was the main bit of my tune, I wouldn't need to add anything else to it. Then start putting an arrangement, and just start with a really basic one. Just like, don't even worry about, transitional sounds or any of that sort of stuff. Literally just like lay out whatever you want, a 16-bar intro, whatever you like to do for your own sort of structure. Like, none of the extra fluffy bits, or the extra bits of sprinkling on top. Just lay out what you have, turn that into a DJ friendly structure if you want to make it DJ friendly. If not, that's fine too. Yep. But turn it into a basic structure that is like, okay, this is the song from beginning to end. This is where it goes intro. This is the bit that's like the main bit. And then this is the outro. Yep. At that point is when you're going to be able to tell what it needs to do to go from intro to main bit and from main bit to outro and so on. Because once you know what the kind of the upper limit per se is, like the maximum point of stuff going on,
yep,
then all the rest is literally just window dressing.
Mate, that's fucking great advice. Andrew Wowk, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I had such a great time. That was such a cool chat.
Hello, legend. Thank you so much for watching all the way till the end. If you'd like that, I got a ton more of these interviews being uploaded constantly on the YouTube page. And I do a weekly mix on Mixcloud every Saturday. So if you can subscribe, like, comment, that helps out loads with the algorithm. And if you follow me everywhere and you like the sound of what's going on here, let me know. I'm always open to hearing from people. This is very new. I'm figuring it out as I go along. But yeah, there's tons more. Check out the other interviews. Follow me. Listen. Jump onto the live stream. Say hi. I'm a friendly dude, and I really appreciate you watching. So thank you so much. You're a fucking legend. Love ya. Peace. Bye.